Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Week 1 in the books. We're ready to cook, baby. What's going on? It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Brian Drake. FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by the analytical assassin, Pro Football Focus, and EstablishTheRun.com's Dwain McFarland. My friend, we had a week of football, started Thursday night with the fireworks in Kansas City, and it went all the way through last night to the big guy, Derrick Henry, rumbling into Denver. How was your week 1, my friend? Did you kick some ass? Did you win some money on DraftKings? I know we were exchanging a few screenshots.
Yeah, I won some money on DraftKings and on FanDuel. My Aaron Rodgers stacks paid off huge, so feel pretty good about those. But as far as season long goes, I mean, it's kind of like a 50-50 proposition, to be honest. As you know, some guys I own a lot. I have questions about. Some guys I own a lot. They didn't do great, but I don't have questions. I feel really good about them looking at the underlying data. And then there's other guys that I don't own that everybody's going crazy for that I'm still fine not owning. And there's other guys that I'm like, man, wish I would have drafted him. So we can touch on some of those, whoever you want to hit, man.
Yeah, man. So we appreciate all the guys coming into the chat room here on YouTube and wherever you find the show. Maybe it's Facebook or whatever, but we'd love for you guys to get in to the chat room, talk to us, ask us some questions. It's an interactive show. If you're listening on the podcast, we appreciate that. Don't be afraid to tweet us at FF Hustle. He is at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN McFarland. I'm at Drake Fantasy. And let us know what you want to talk about. But what we're going to do here going forward with these shows, Dwain has so much crazy data from PFF, man. It's just out of control. He's just itching to get it out and to let you guys hear stuff that nobody else in the industry has. All right. Like Dwain's going to blow people away this year. It's going to be so fun to watch. And as we always do, we'll kind of hit a bunch of teams, talk about situations, of course, let you guys in on some waiver wire stuff. Let's start off, though, Dwain, with the news of the day. Man, you'd think it was week 12 with all these injuries, brother. Michael Thomas now, he's got the high ankle sprain, expected to miss several weeks. It was kind of a joke when they were like, oh, high ankle sprain, we'll see if he can play this week. Like, no, that's not how that works with a high ankle sprain. So if he's down for a few weeks, we don't got to spend tons of time on all these injured guys, but does anything change in this New Orleans offense? Do you like Tre'Quan Smith, Jared Cook? Where are we going?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what happened to Michael Thomas in the game, it actually explains a lot. You know, I don't know exactly when that injury happened, Drake. I don't know if you know. I know it wasn't early in the game. It seems like it was later in the game where was seeing a replay, and I can't remember. It might have been even Kamara that rolled up on him, but obviously Michael Thomas. Fourth quarter. So I know it was later, but he wasn't doing very much in the game anyway. So I mean, the Bucs were very aggressive. I have to say, man, that defense is pretty fun to watch. Like just going at it. But as far as Michael Thomas goes, if you look at this past week, Emmanuel Sanders was out there for 68% of the routes, and surprise, surprise, who you named, Tre'Quan Smith was out there for 74% of the routes. He was only targeted 4% of the time though. But it is a guy that we got to pay attention to. Drew Brees did say he thinks this is Tre'Quan's year, and it was interesting to see in week 1 from a snap perspective, 65% for Tre'Quan and only 47% for Emmanuel Sanders. They do like Tre'Quan as a blocker better, but I think now, you're looking at these are the two guys that are going to be on the field. I think they're going to both see quite a bit of a bump. Jared Cook saw 21% of the targets, which was pretty decent for him. He ran a route on 68% of the snaps, not up there in the elite levels, but still pretty solid. So if you've got Mike Thomas and you're looking for, your replacement, I think that Sanders in shallower leagues would be the only way he's out there. But if you're thinking DFS, Sanders is probably going to be a pretty heavy play, this weekend. I mean, I can't imagine, how much he'll be. It depends on what his price is, but he's playing the Raiders. So, the Raiders, their secondary isn't really very good. So I could easily see him, being a play that everybody uses this weekend. But Tre'Quan is really, the sneakier one. I can't guarantee how much he's going to get, man. I still think Sanders will get more targets. I still think Jared Cook will get more targets. And I think Alvin Kamara. I think everything is going to roll through those three guys. But Smith is certainly in a position where he could surprise us, right? So in deeper leagues, I would say Traquan Smith is a guy that you can add. I'm not going to break the bank by any means. I mean, maybe depending on your situation, 2 to 5%, of your bid. Again, we don't know for sure how long Thomas is going to be out. Smith has still got to prove himself. So it's like even if he kind of breaks out some, once Thomas is back, we really don't know what he'll get.
Do you expect Traquan to just fill in that exact Michael Thomas role? Or do you think they'll move Sanders into the slot?
Well, I mean, Thomas, remember, doesn't really play that much in the slot, but they motion him a lot, and they work his routes in the inside. They let him, work a lot of those routes versus linebackers and safeties. So Traquan is the guy that's more built, right, to do that. You can't do that with Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, there's a different way to win. Tyler Lockett works there, but, he just runs past everybody, and Russell Wilson hits him, deep. That's not really the Saints game, right? They work underneath and then let players, make up, yards after the catch. I don't think you want to really have Sanders operating too much inside. A few big hits from some of those guys, and that's where Thomas was so great. He could hold up over the course of the season, even though he was, taking hits from some of those guys. So, yeah, I would say if a guy is going to play Mike Thomas's role, it would be Traquan Smith. But, again, I don't know how effective he can be.
Now, a lot of shows just want to pat themselves on the back when they're right about things, but we admit here at The Hustle when we're wrong. Dwain titled the show this week, Adapt or Die, when he and I were texting earlier. And one of the guys that we were really high on this summer was James Conner from Pittsburgh. Now, the caveat to that is always the James Conner, if he stays healthy. And guess what? He didn't stay healthy. I mean, geez Louise, the guy can't even make it a freaking halftime before he's out and Benny Snell's eating his lunch. But Steelers coach Mike Tomlin was quoted as saying he'll leave the light on for James Conner in week 2. Everybody you're hearing today, they're acting like James Conner was ran over by a bus and is dead. They're not even really talking about maybe did he have concussion? I mean, did you see anything on a specific injury, Dwain?
I mean, you just heard during the game, they talked about the ankle, and they did eventually later say ankle, and now they're still saying that. So, but it is weird for him to be completely shut down. And then you have, Tomlin coming out and saying, we'll leave the light on. Because I would think if it was a high ankle sprain or something like that would really knock him out of a game, and they took his helmet away, which is often a sign of a concussion, right?
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So, because I think that's actually the rule. If the player has that type of injury, you have to take their helmet away. I think on the others, it's like, yeah, they may take it, but they don't have to, right? So it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm wondering if there isn't more to it, than just like what you're saying. But man, the guy it was just a reminder last night that his style and his skill set just leads to, a ton of contact, and so it's something you're just going to have to deal with. The bigger problem, Drake, is that Benny Snell looked really good. This is not Benny Snell from 2019. He's kind of like the Le'Veon Bell, right? Where we saw kind of fat, heavy Le'Veon Bell rookie year, and everybody's like, meh. The next year he comes back, he's really worked. And we hear this kind of stuff all the time, and it never matters, right? Oh, he's slighter. He's, he's got, less body fat, blah, blah, blah. But Benny Snell really did look good.
Yeah.
He showed more burst, I thought, than Conner. He was making more out of less than what Conner was doing. He was getting more push than Conner. So yeah, Benny Snell, man, it's a must add. Really, in every format, just on and look, maybe they let Conner play, maybe they don't. We just really don't know what's going to happen. But Benny Snell's a guy, where I own him more than Conner, honestly, because Conner got so expensive. I wasn't going to take him over DeAndre Hopkins and guys like that most often. Every once in a while I might, but for the most part, I was sticking, with some of the receivers. Once he just started going the second round, in the mid-second round, which was becoming quite regular. So with Snell, he's a must add. He was 68% of the rushing attempts last night. Now he didn't get the 2-minute drill. He also did play 3rd and 4th downs and long. So when I say 3rd, 4th, and long, that means 7 yards or more. So this is some of the new awesome stuff that I have access to. So he was only on the field for 25%, of that. He was the back in the 4-minute offense. So some other cool stuff, like when they wanted to grind it down, he got 100% of it. But Jalen Samuels got 100% of the 2-minute work. And then if you look at, the receptions on 3rd and 4th down, or the snaps on 3rd and 4th down and long, it was 50% to Jalen Samuels. So I think Samuels is going to be involved. And then I think you're going to see Anthony McFarland get a little bit of a role too, because what was interesting to me, Drake, and I don't know if it was just the injury, but even early on, before we were for sure that he had an injury or anything, and he was kind of rotating in and out, I don't know how quickly he was hurt, but the other guys were all kind of sprinkling in, right away. Like it was like Samuels was out there, Snell was out there, and then Connor would be back out there. And then Connor would come off, and, one of the other guys would be on, and then Connor would come back in. So we don't know for sure if that was injury related or they were just really kind of sprinkling these guys in. So, in all leagues, I think Snell's an ad. I think, Jalen Samuels, I'm not really that worried about. I mean, he could pick up a little bit of PPR value, but I mean, like literally you have to be in a super deep league. I think the other guy I would rather add, right, would be McFarland, because if for some reason, Snell does get hurt, or this just opens up enough, right, of a door to let McFarland get, some plays if Connor's out. And if he flashes, he could earn a larger role. We know that he's got speed. And right now, let's be honest, I mean, there's not a ton of speed, on the Steelers. Like Juju doesn't win by being fast. Claypool shows to be fast. He doesn't play that fast on film. He's more of a big body guy, work down the field. Deontay Johnson is quicker than fast. So Washington's the fastest, is the guy that plays the fastest, right, on film. And he's a receiver. So they could always use having a little bit more, from another back that could give them a different dynamic. So in deeper leagues, I'm going to be targeting McFarland, and you should still be able to get him pretty cheap. I would say probably 2 to 5% of your fab is going to get you McFarland. And in the cases that doesn't, fine. You can be okay with that. But I think on Snell, you're going to have to look at your roster. You're going to have to think about your situation. He's going to cost if the James Conner owner knows who Benny Snell is, which is most likely by now. I mean, they're going to at least put 30 to 50% of their money on him. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to be willing to go in that range. It's up to you if you want to go higher, but I would at least enforce that. I would call that an enforcing bid. Like I'm at least going to put a third out there on Benny Snell, just to make the James Conner owner at least have to pay enough. And if he doesn't, I'll take him, for 30%, of my fab, because if he does have this role, look how excited we were about Connor, and this guy looks good. I mean, and he doesn't have the injury history. This could be 12, 14 touchdowns, Drake. And if all of a sudden he starts to work into the passing game a little more, they trust him a little more there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could be talking about an RB1.
Absolutely. And a guy who's going to be an RB1 probably for the rest of the season is Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis. Marlon Mack went down with an Achilles injury. So Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines are going to be popular names. Taylor, I'm sure, was drafted, unless you're in in a 4-team league somewhere with a bunch of 12-year-olds. But Nyheim Hines maybe in some leagues is on some wires. You never know. And Hines looked good right from the jump. He was targeted. 37% of Rivers' passes went to running backs. Both of these guys saw 15 touches out there. Hines looks like a legit player. If you're in a PPR league and you can get your hands on Hines because Taylor's already gone, I'd happily start him every week. But this backfield is just ready for Jonathan Taylor to explode and become a top 5 fantasy pick in 2021.
Yeah, I think Hines is 25 to 50% of your fab if you're really hurting it. If you're hurting at running back and you're in a PPR league. Look, the simple narrative was Phillip Rivers throws to running backs, so Nyheim Hines is going to catch 100 passes. Things don't normally work that simple, but that literally is what we have going on here. My concern was, well, when you got Marlon Mack, you got Jonathan Taylor, and now all of a sudden, you got to figure out how Hines, gets in there. It was just a concern. Now, what I will say, that you're going to have to watch, and I think, so remember Marlon Mack last year when it was really him and Hines, they were like polarizing players. In the weeks where the Colts would be leading and winning the game, you were happy to own, Marlon Mack. You loved having him in your lineup. And the weeks where they trailed and got behind, man, you hated having Marlon Mack in your lineup. And remember, Mack wasn't terrible last year. He was good, and he had a good offensive line. So Taylor's going to face some of that. But then the opposite was true, right? In a game where if they were close or leading and they wanted to lean on the run, they would. And then Hines would hardly get any work. He would still get a same kind of percentage of routes, per drop back. But, it was a much smaller piece of the pie because they were running the ball so much, and then he just wasn't viable. So, you got to keep that in mind. I think you could still have some ups and downs, but I do know that Rivers, he's feeding all these guys. He's feeding all of the running backs. So, I mean, you definitely have to kind of, stand at attention on it and, be willing to think through, what you want your bid amount, to be. What I'll say is, Jacoby Brissett is gone, and it's good because, just from a standpoint of the amount of plays, Drake, we're really back to where we need to be with the Colts. Remember, this is a guy, Frank Reich, that's like Doug Peterson. He runs 1,050, 1,100 plays every single year, like clockwork, until last year you got a bus driver at quarterback and you're just trying to manage the games. And that's what Brissett was. Well, yesterday, 69 offensive snaps, for, Phillip Rivers and the Colts. And while Rivers, may have lost them the game and didn't, make a lot of NFL fans happy, like from watching from a fantasy perspective, man, I thought Rivers, looks like a viable option.
Sure.
He's getting the ball out quick. He's hitting, receivers and playmakers that can do something with the ball after the catch, and he's going to have a good running game. The one thing I'll say is the running game didn't really materialize. The Colts were within 3 points, Drake, 68% of this game. They trailed only 16%, yet they threw the ball 70% of the time. So the narrative that's a little different to me right now is everybody suspected that they were just going to pound the ball. They're not. That could hurt Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to stay, 70, 65% pass, and Peterson's teams have done that in the past. I'm sorry, Reich, Peterson's disciple. That's going to be, that's going to create some issues, for Jonathan Taylor. So just something, to think about. Obviously, if you have Jonathan Taylor, you love it right now. You spent your 3rd round pick probably on him, and it worked out for you. Obviously nobody wants Marlon Mack to be hurt, but you basically got instant gratification on your pick.
We hope you didn't spend a 3rd round pick on Le'Veon Bell. You got none of that talk here. So if you're hustling with us, hopefully you don't have Le'Veon Bell on any of your teams. But Le'Veon Bell to the short-term IR with a hamstring injury. He could be back around week 5 if he comes back at all. Because I talked to a guy I know. I've got sources, Dwain, actually. So I know a guy who is in close with the Jets, and he's the one. He told me that they're going to sign. Who's the kid they just signed? My name escapes me. The bum from either way, the scrub they signed.
Oh, Balaj.
Balaj, yes, thank you. I had a brain fart.
Sorry.
Yeah, I had that before Ian Rappaport. If you go check the Twitter, I put that out there because my guy told me he knew his agent. And he also told me Le'Veon Bell and the Jets were close or were in talks last year with the Steelers about a trade. I don't know how much that got out there, but this Jets source told me that absolutely happened. And don't be surprised if they don't revisit those things this year. But if you had Bell, he's out. I don't know if we necessarily want to touch this backfield, but if you have Bell, you're looking for a replacement. And there's Gore. We make jokes about Gore all the time. I think the sneaky play here is to pick up LaMichael Pirine, and when he gets over his ankle injury, he just could become the guy. They spent a 3rd round pick on him, I believe. Why not? If you're going to move away from Bell at some point, I'm not worried about 80-year-old Frank Gore. Again, famous last words of Brian Drake, trying to poo-poo Frank Gore. But what do you think about
Dude, you got to stay on brand with it. I mean, you can't stop now. I mean, you got to stick with it, Drake.
Yeah, F you, Frank Gore. He's going to come to my house and kick my ass.
One of the best running backs, just guy keeps playing, and we should admire everything about him. And
him and AP, they're unbelievable. They should be at the old folks' home right now.
I know.
Literally, I'm older than both of them, I think. But
yeah, so I really don't want anything to do with this backfield. We saw what Le'Veon Bell did. They get Buffalo this week. I agree if I was to put, like a 1% bid down somewhere, 2%er, if you got a super deep bench, pick up Pirine, that's fine. But man, you got to figure out who to drop for him. We can talk about here in a little bit, we can let people submit like, hey, should I drop? Like, I'm sure there's names, that people are trying to think about. It's going to be hard to come up with a name that I really feel like dropping unless there's an injury, for any of these Jets backs. If you're in a shallow league, forget it. Don't even mess with it. Let somebody else deal with that crap. If you're in a deep league, which I play in a lot of those, I get it. It's going to depend on your roster. If you get somebody that, is injured or somebody that just put up a complete dud week 1, you might be able to throw him on, but he's probably going to be like your backup bid. There's much better things to be going after.
Kittle, Debo, you name it. They're in San Francisco. They're hurt. Kittle with a knee sprain. He had a hyperextension, I believe, of the same knee last year. So
this looked like a hyperextension. If you saw the play, I was watching it live. It went, backwards. So it'll be interesting. And they tried to downplay it, for the strategy of the game because they literally have no one, to go to. But yeah, I was pretty sure like, hey, once he has a day to not be on that thing, it's going to tighten up and he was probably going to have issues. But yeah, man. So they signed Mohamed Sanu, big fat who cares. Jimmy Garoppolo does not look good. He's fading away from pressure all the time. Like every time he throws, like go check Matt Waldman's feed, and he's shown this before. But once Matt showed it to me like 2 years ago, it's like all I see when I watch Jimmy Garoppolo. Every throw is literally like this twist away from, even if the hit's not close to him. And I think it does cause problems, with his accuracy. And to be fair, there's just nobody to go to. I mean, Samuel's not going to be back for another 4 to 5 weeks. Maybe Ayuk can get going this next week. That would be the play in my mind in shallower leagues, would be to target him. The other guy you could target that I think is going to be heavily involved in people, I don't know how long it'll last, but I think it's Jordan Reed. If Kittle misses 3 or 4 weeks, man, I'm telling you, Jordan Reed's probably going to be a tight end 1. He'll benefit from the mismatches. He's not going to be Kittle, but he can give you back end tight end 1 production. So, tight ends are pretty deep this year, but maybe you own Blake Jarwin. Maybe you own Irv Smith. We can talk about him later.
Yep.
Reed's a good option. If there's nobody, if you're in a deep league and there's nobody else on the wire, I'm talking like Jonnu Smith and Noah Fant and Hawkinson, all those guys are gone, right? You're in, Skank League, Drake. Then, Jordan Reed is definitely in play.
So let's hit these waivers real quick. And I think what I'm going to start doing for our fans out there is I might do a little waiver wire quick cast on Monday nights or Tuesday mornings, just me. And then it'll kind of just go, hey, if you need to pick guys up, bing, bang, boom, here you go. And then, we'll get into the meat and potatoes here when we got my main man, Dwain, to break it all down for us. Let's just run through a couple guys quick at the quarterback position. If you're out there, you need a QB. If Cam Newton wasn't drafted in your league, pick up Cam Newton by all means. My God, the pace
Hopefully
of play.
You've been listening to this show and Cam Newton was in your draft plans. We did miss some things, but we'll take our W's too. I mean, we talked about Cam. I talked about him all off season, he's basically an arbitrage play on who? Josh Allen. What'd you get yesterday? An arbitrage play. Now, Josh Allen was 1, but man, Newton was right there. Now he's not going to get to play the Dolphins, every week. He's going to get some tougher matchups.
It's Seattle this week.
Starts with Seattle this week. They won't just be ahead all the time, but man, Cam's running the ball a ton, and man, they're running play action so much, Drake. 52% of their plays had a play action pass involved. So still don't love his weapons, but it's very clear, man, they're going to run his wheels until the tires fall off as far as, letting him get those. I mean, he's basically their RB1 right now. Sure. Let's be honest. He's their RB1. So if you want to start an RB1 at quarterback, you need to start Cam Newton. Essentially, that's the same thing you're doing with Josh Allen, but he's got a little more upside in the passing game due to some weapons.
I tell you, you and I talk a lot about my home league that all I care about in life is, my kids, my wife, and my home fantasy league. And
that was the wrong order, but yeah. Usually
I got to be nice. She's probably watching. So, she's putting the kids to bed and listening in the background. But I knew the Eagles' offensive line woes Sunday morning, and I knew about Boston Scott playing. And I have Carson Wentz as my main quarterback. So I said, I got to get out of this. There's no way I can play Wentz with that offensive line. He's going to get killed. He's not going to make it through the second half. He almost didn't. I mean, they sacked him 8 or 9 times. And I ended up pulling off a trade. And it's great when you make a fantasy trade and you never even have to text the guy and work him. I just sent my buddy a trade who had Mahomes and Cam Newton. I go, here's the offer. James Robinson, the running back for the Jags, for Cam Newton. 2 minutes later, I get the notification on my phone. He accepted the trade. Boom! Cam Newton in the lineup. Loved it. So I got him going the rest of the way. If you don't have Cam Newton and you need somebody else, Dwain, what do you think about guys like?
Think about this. Like, you could have just listened to me. I told you to draft Cam Newton and not Carson Wentz anyway. Come on, man. You gotta use my advice like 1 out of 5 times.
The next draft I did 2 days later, back-to-back rounds, Carson Wentz, Cam Newton. So don't worry. I got him out there, folks. Are you into Tannehill? I'm not into, Tannehill. Okay, whatever. Tyrod, I've no interest in. There's a reason.
Tannehill is Arthur Smith is showing a different gear. It's freaking 78 plays last night, Drake. And the score was never, they were never up by more than 3 or down by more than 3. 90% of the plays were within 3 points. So they dropped back to pass 59% of the time on those plays. So I don't know. It may have been the game plan because you're playing the Broncos, and you thought that's the way to beat them. They did shut Derrick Henry down, last year, with their penetrating style. That's the way you get Henry. You can't let him get going at all. Like, you just kind of have to take risk and try to, make the guy get off. It's like a quarterback, make him get off of his spot and change direction, get him kind of sideways. And then, you can take him down and gang tackle him. If you let him get momentum, he's, really a problem. They did pretty good with Henry last night. He still got his yards. But, they played him pretty well, but keep an eye on this. I mean, and he kept the play action intact, 33%, and they got more folks involved. If you look at Tannehill's accuracy, last night, man, like he was really good. If you look at, his receivers, I like looking at it by, the receivers and how deep, they were targeted.
Sure. People are asking about Corey Davis. So I don't know when we're going to get to Corey Davis and
I can do it now.
Lay it on him.
We can do it now. Yeah, good call. So if you look at his catchable target rates, we could compare this to Baker Mayfield and you would laugh. But I mean, if you look at it for here, let me do this. Sorry. So for AJ Brown, it was 71%. For Corey Davis, it was 88%. For Jonnu Smith, it was 100%. I mean, so the guy is like putting the ball on people. Like his accuracy right now, it was really hot last year, and it looked like that part of his game carried over. They weren't as explosive last night as they were last year, but they ran more plays. Tannehill, man, he's got legs. He could surprise people. He might be a top 12 fantasy quarterback this year.
I'm not into Tyrod at all. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Corey Davis. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, Corey Davis, look, you could have got him super late. He's going to be on the wire. Ran a route on 87%, of Tannehill's dropbacks. Same thing for AJ Brown. They distributed the ball pretty evenly, 22% to Davis, 19% to Brown, 19%, to Jonnu Smith. So it looks like they're going to distribute the ball. Adam Humphries got, in the game as well, 16%. So I think what you're going to see is a pretty even distribution. I think the potential bad news here, right, is that with Corey Davis stepping up and apparently, pissed that he didn't get his 5th-year extension and he wants to make some money next year. And then you look at Jonnu Smith, looked really good. You got Adam Humphries back. AJ Brown, man, he's going to need Tannehill to keep this volume up. And if he does, I think, AJ will be fine. I think he's still going to, make his plays. And you could look at this as being a positive. You could think, oh, man, Brown's going to get all these extra targets because Tannehill's throwing so much. Well, he's spreading it around, a little bit more. Last year down the stretch, it basically became the AJ Brown show. I mean, Corey Davis was just like a forgotten, stepchild or something. So that sounds terrible. I've been a stepchild, so nothing against stepchildren. But Corey Davis looked pretty good last night, Drake. He wasn't like doing anything spectacular, but he looked good. He's a former first-round pick. So in deeper leagues, yes, I would be fine picking up Corey Davis. Again, another player that I'm not going to go break the bank on because I don't see him becoming the alpha on the team. And we still don't know for sure if they'll keep passing the ball all the time. But, if you're really hurting at receiver, I mean, I'm fine with 5 to 10% on Corey Davis if that's what you need to do. I'm sure we'll talk about some other guys that I like a little bit more. But Davis is in play in deep leagues. Yeah,
somebody in our chat room asked, would you drop Rager for Corey Davis?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
Rager's going to be.
I expect Rager is just going to get the ball more and more and more. Now, he could get re-injured, right? And so that's the risk with him. But he only played, he only ran a route on 60% of the snaps last weekend. So did Deshaun Jackson. And they said after the game that they're going to be getting them more involved. I mean, you can probably tell the audience better than me, Drake. But I think both of those guys are going to continue to see more and more snaps.
Sure. Another quarterback out there, if you need somebody, hell, why not? I listened to a podcast with Greg Cosell, the great NFL films evaluator, and he said, everyone thinks the Jaguars are tanking for Trevor Lawrence. He goes, if you watch Gardner Minshew and you know what you're looking for, they don't need a quarterback. He loves Gardner Minshew. And if you watch what Minshew did this week, the guy's a player. He just because he's got goofy hair and he looks like he's in like a 1980s, I don't know, high school musical or something. Like, he's good. I would have no problem putting Minshew in if I'm in a super deep league or 2 quarterback and I needed a second guy.
Yeah. Minshew looked good. I mean, the problem is, man, the 4.6 average depth of target. Good grief. Like, push the ball down the field a little bit. DJ Chark owners have got to be like petrified right now. Thank God he had a touchdown, but only 3 targets, and he caught that, he caught the touchdown down in the red zone, which was good for him. But Minshew, 95% adjusted completion percentage. So when you back out any drops, I mean, that's insane. But at 4.6 yards, ADOT, I mean, you're going to complete a lot of passes. So he did look good, but I thought he got to check things down a lot. Let's see what some other defenses do. And we need some other defenses to challenge them, Drake, because we need them to get a little bit more vertical. But I was very, encouraged by, Shenault, got involved. Thompson was a little bit involved, not as much as we thought because the game stayed closer, but he was still out there. And of course, you got DJ Chark, you got Chris Conley, working vertical. But really, the other one was Keelan Cole. Like, who expected? Like, did anybody even know that Keelan Cole was still alive, Drake?
No, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go look at it, Keelan Cole, man, he was the next after Chark, who ran a route on 93% of plays, 79% for Keelan Cole. Oh, and the number 1 target on the team, 25%. So again, don't go nuts, but Keelan Cole looks to be the 2. I think Shenault is the 3. Chark is the 1. I think that all still holds, and everything we said about the backfield, still the same.
All right, let's move on to some running backs and kind of touch on these guys and their teams. How about the job Malcolm Brown did for the LA Rams? First of all, kudos to Sean McVay for the game plan that he put in to beat that Cowboys pass rush, just getting that ball out super quick. Brown looked unbelievable, 79 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns on 18 carries. He had 3 catches for 31 yards. Cam Akers did get 14 carries, Dwain, but Malcolm Brown looks like a guy who's not going away, and I'm sure he's on a bunch of waiver wires. To me, if I can't get Nyheim Hines, Malcolm Brown's the number 2 option for me. You could plug him in and play him tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I mean, Brown looked really good. I'm not going to lie. They obviously do still want to get Akers involved, but I could see Akers even getting a little less work, the way Brown looked. Now, to your point, they had the perfect scheme to defeat Dallas. That was like death by screen passes. Malcolm Brown had 2 play action passes that somehow were passes to him still. I mean, that's the kind of screens they were coming up with. Play action to Malcolm Brown. Screen pass to Malcolm Brown. It's like, how is that even possible? But he had 2 of those. So McVay, really dialed up the perfect game plan. He didn't let Goff hold on to the ball, very long. Brown's a guy that, I hadn't thought about how much he's going to cost, to be honest. I'm kind of just thinking through it right here, on the spot. People that are starved at running back, they're probably, he was number 5 for the week. When people see that, they're like, number 5? And then they look at, they're like, man, I was listening to Dwain McFarland and I drafted James Conner. He's probably going to cost half of your free agent bid. He's probably going to cost 50%. Do you think he's going to cost less than 50%?
I've got a league where I put a bid on him and it's at $100. I put $36. I'm okay in that league if I don't get him, but
I think that's a strong enforcement bid, 35, 33%. I would prioritize him a little higher than Snell just because he's already in the role. And we don't know for sure what's happening with James, Conner, but he's like bump him 5% over the numbers I gave for Snell. Right. So maybe you're giving 40, to 55%, maybe versus, just a third. So if you really want Malcolm Brown and if you need him because your running backs are just trash, do it. And if you own Akers, even better, if you can carry both, I'm not dropping Akers. That's the other thing. He's still got enough work that it shows me that, yes, they do want him to be involved. And you know how this thing goes, dude. Somebody next week, Malcolm Brown gets hurt. I'll tell you what, Darrell Henderson, I don't know if it was injury, but he's a non-factor.
Yeah, cut his ass if you got him. Somebody you don't want to cut is Joshua Kelly of the Chargers. Again, if you listen to the Draft Plan show, somebody who should probably be on your roster. And he's basically playing that Melvin Gordon role. I don't see, in my opinion, Austin Eckler holding up if they're trying to give him 12 carries a game. Kelly ran for 60 yards and a score on 12 carries against the Bengals. If he's out there, Dwayne, put him on the roster. I like him. I think he's going to have a role. And imagine if Eckler goes down. Whew.
Yeah, hopefully you just drafted him. I mean, I don't know that anybody talked, Kelly up more than our show. He was a guy that I definitely had, in my guys article at Football Guys. We talked about him every week on this show pretty much. I drafted him in 55% of my leagues. So hopefully he's a guy that you guys did get. I know we gave you some that you're like, man, that sucks. I think we did pretty good on our late round stuff. The James Conner thing definitely sucks. But Josh Kelly's a guy that absolutely I want to own. And I think he showed what he needed to this last week. Remember, we wasn't getting this until Justin Jackson got hurt. They had been kind of splitting, and Justin Jackson went down, and they're actually looking at other backs now. So that shows you Jackson's prop might be out for a little bit. But yeah, I think Kelly, he didn't get the Melvin Gordon role, but he could work his way into it, to your point. What's interesting though, man, is they gave Eckler the carries, maybe because they're not going to target him. I don't know. Tyrod did his Tyrod thing.
He's not going to check down. He's not.
He threw the ball down the field. We talked about it on one of our shows. I mean, Mike Williams ended up hurt, so that kind of took us off of him. But we actually talked about, look, Mike Williams is the guy that if anybody's going to surprise, it will be him on this team because he fits what Tyrod Taylor likes to do. And for a guy with a hurt shoulder, Drake, like, good God. I mean, he got drilled and fell, multiple times, came down hard on his head, on his shoulder. Like, if he made it through that game, it's like, okay, I mean, you have my attention because, I mean, he was physically abused in every way, by the ground, by the opponent. He had 30% of the targets, man. And he's I feel like John Gruden right there, man. He's
John Gruden got fat, by the way. You see him?
He might be, yeah. He might be their wide receiver one. So we'll see with Eckler. So that's the only concern with Eckler is if they know they're not going to throw it to him as much, are they going to give him more carries just to keep his workload down? We don't know yet. But if I'm with you, I'm like, Josh Kelly gives you that option now to use him that way and make Tyrod get the ball to Eckler in the passing game. I mean, direct orders from the coaches. But you saw Keenan Allen was the third target this past week. So some of those things we were a little worried about definitely kind of popped up. Now, Allen wasn't terrible. He still had like 25%. So we'll see what happens. But Tyrod pushing the ball down the field, man.
Tyrod Taylor made the playoffs as a starting quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills hadn't made the playoffs in literally a billion years. I'm not exaggerating. They got rid of his ass that offseason. That's all you need to know about Tyrod Taylor. All right, enough of him. Question in the chat room here. Would you drop Philip Lindsay, who's battling turf toe now, to draft to pick up some of these running back options?
Yes, man, I hate turf toe. Absolutely. I'm not going to clog up a roster spot. When do you remember turf toe ever being something somebody came back from and was really good in a short amount of time? All I ever remember is somebody coming back and re-injuring it if they came back too early, or it took 8 to 10 weeks if they really let them rest. And they've got Melvin Gordon. They've got Royce Freeman, who they didn't cut, who I think he's a guy you should think about as a pickup, and you won't have to pay a lot for Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman's probably going to be pretty involved along with Melvin Gordon. I expect Melvin Gordon to get a little bit more work now, but I think Royce Freeman's a guy that will definitely be eating into Gordon's, carry some, and you'll be able to get him for cheap. But yes, I'm cutting Philip Lindsay. I don't care if it's an 8-man league, a 10-man league, a 12-man double flex. I'm serious, man. Yeah. You get week one. And if some of these guys that we're talking about are out there, I'm not carrying Philip Lindsay over Benny Snell. I'm not carrying Philip Lindsay over Josh Kelly. Yes, I'll carry him over the Jets guys, but I'm probably going to drop him for a receiver or a tight end or something. I'm just not going to let Philip Lindsay clog up my roster at this point. Not from week one. I've done that before. I'm fine. I'll live with the risk that week 4 he comes back and miraculously, he's healed and he looks great. I'll take my chances.
Somebody in the chat was also mentioning J.K. Dobbins. Obviously he scored 2 touchdowns. He's probably owned in every league, but just would love to get your quick thoughts, Dwayne, on that Ravens split backfield now.
Yeah, so it's funny, man. People actually crack me up. Look, and I love J.K. Dobbins. People are like, oh, man, J.K. Dobbins is overtaking Mark Ingram. Remember last year when the Ravens blew out Miami in week 1. Remember that?
Ravens blew out everybody.
Guess who led the team in carries that first week when they won by like 40?
Is that Gus Edwards?
Gus Edwards. They give the second back more carries. They don't let Ingram close out games. They save him. So the good news is the Ravens do blow out a lot of people. So you're going to have chances to start Dobbins. What I would say, though, is you can't start Dobbins every week. You have to play the matchup. Now, if you're playing against another really good offense, if you're playing against, another really good defense that may give them trouble, which is hard to do. Really, only the Steelers did it last year. And the Steelers, obviously still early, but they didn't look too, good, in their pass defense last night at times, against the Giants. Pass rush was still definitely there, and I think they'll still round into form. But Dobbins is not a guy that you can just plug into your lineups and forget it. If you think that, I'm sorry, you're probably going to get burned. I mean, he played 40% of the snaps versus 34 for Ingram, 26% for Gus Edwards. And that's the problem. Gus Edwards is still involved, routes. He ran a route on 50% of the passes. That's the best thing for Dobbins, is that he was the number one passing back. And remember, we were hearing that all through training camp. Dobbins being used in the red zone, Dobbins being used inside the 5 as a receiver. So I think that could save your floor on a weekly basis a little bit, maybe similar to the thought process people had around Kareem Hunt, which we'll get to later. So if you're in a super deep league, like double flex, great, put Dobbins in, but there's probably other options that you can put in that you're going to feel, better about, unless you just really have a great matchup. The other thing, Drake, is he got 71% of the snaps in the 2-minute offense. He took 86% of the snaps on third and fourth down and long. They didn't run a fourth down, but third and long. So that's 7 yards or more. He had 86% of the snaps. He did get both of the carries inside the 5. So he had 100% of those. But again, they were out so far in front. I don't know how much that part is going to stick. What I do like is his role in the passing game. So we could revisit this, like Drake, in 2 weeks, maybe even next week. Let's say next week it's a really close game and we see the same thing from Dobbins. Then I'll say, fine, you can start him. If you're in a 12-man league and he's your second flex play, do it. In an 8-man league, you still won't be starting him. In a 10-man league, it's going to be tricky to get him on the field unless, it's a deep league where you start a ton of players. But if he holds that up in some tighter games, then yeah, I mean, he could have some insulation through the passing game.
We usually don't like to talk about players on shitty teams, but here we are. It's week 1. We're digging deep. You need a running back, because there was a kid who was really productive in college. I think he went to Washington, had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and all of a sudden he's on the field blowing past guys a team gave money to and traded picks for, and it's Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. Now, he had 9 carries for 40 yards, but he did catch 4 targets for 26 yards. They were running more of a spread. I read a bunch of articles today from Miami papers, and Brian Flores was saying, hey, we like certain backs in certain packages, and Gaskin just fit the packages we were doing, which to me says, okay, when we're in spread and hurry up and we're behind, which Miami's going to be behind a lot, Gaskins is on the field because, Jordan Howard's not going to be out there catching passes, and Matt Breida is basically the same player. And Breida didn't get I don't think his first carry until almost halftime on Sunday. Is Myles Gaskin a guy we want to look at, or is this just another avoid?
I don't want him. They trailed on 83% of plays.
That's
and
not
he's
good.
Still splitting time. He's still splitting time. So yeah, he led the way. But do you really want a 3-way committee? Like, it's one thing if it's the Patriots where you're like, man, they could, play good defense and score, a lot of touchdowns. Of course, now you got Cam Newton in the way, but that was the old thinking, right? With Brady, this is the opposite. You got a 3-way backfield, and it just doesn't look good, Drake. I don't see anything about Gaskins that makes me feel good at all. Jordan Howard got all the work inside the 5. Who knows what the deal with Breida was? Maybe he did something wrong in practice, or he missed a bus ride or something, and they kept him out. It's really weird. And so do I want Rex Burkhead playing on the worst offense maybe in the league? No, I don't. So, I mean, super deep league, fine, but don't put like more than 2 or 3%, on the guy. If you feel like you just need him to fill a spot for you, because literally like you're starting a fullback as your second running back, fine. In that case, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm not interested.
All right. It's a Friday night. You're 38 White Claws deep. We're on Pornhub going from three-way to three-way. And it's from Miami to Washington, where Antonio Gibson, Bryce Love, and J.D. McKissick are holding down the fort for Riverboat Ron. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know what a douchebag I think Riverboat Ron is and how overblown he is. But he's, guy's got cancer. I'm not trying to say he's a bad guy, but the nickname's a little much for a guy that punted twice on 4th and 1 in the first half. So spare me that narrative. So let's get into this. This is kind of off script, Dwain, but Antonio Gibson was a guy who had a lot of hype. He saw 9 carries for 44 yards, but as I tweeted during the game, he didn't get the money touches. 2 touchdowns went to Bryce Love. If Gibson is not getting Peyton Barber, if you're not getting those money touches and you're really not catching the ball either, like how much can I use a guy who's just kind of active between the 20s? You've got to get the goal line work, especially on a team, again, that's not very good. Like, what do you do if you have Antonio Gibson or now some guys like, hey, maybe I'll pick up Peyton Barber?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I guess the only thing that I would say is just, going back, and I did watch a little bit of that on my phone the other night whenever I couldn't fall asleep. I was like, I'm just going to watch Antonio Gibson. No, I was really wanting to go watch Peyton Barber. You know me, Drake.
Pornhub to Pornhub. See, we're talking,
Yeah, exactly. See, yes, Barber led the team with the 17 attempts. Gibson had 9. McKissick had 3. But man, Gibson, he looked pretty good, I thought, on his carries.
He does look explosive.
He's still super young. And I still, I talked about this with Ian Hartitz earlier on the PFF pod, which will post tomorrow. It still goes back to that quote, and Ian brought this up. But, Peterson told us what they were doing. Look, they're letting me go because they want to go with the young guy. What that didn't mean is they're going to give it all to him right away. I am not dropping Antonio Gibson.
No. You got to put him on the bench, and you got to wait. You got to just let that sauce marinate. That's what you got to do. He's a slow-cooking barbecue.
Yeah, and let him show us. But I have a feeling it's going to come, and you're going to be pretty excited about it when it, goodness, wow, that played right into your three-way stuff. But anyway, Drake, you got me all screwed up, dude.
It's all right.
I don't care anything about owning McKissick or Barber.
Yeah.
Now, the Redskins' defense could be, they got problems on the back end, and the Eagles exposed it early. And so those problems just aren't going to go away. But man, the front 7 might keep them closer in games, so Barber could score some touchdowns. But here's my question: when will we ever feel comfortable putting Peyton Barber in a lineup? Like how deep does the league have to be, and how many flex players must you be starting for that to happen?
Speaking of a deep league, and hello to our friend Derek Brown, D-Bro, former guest of the show, jumping in the chat. We did the Kings Classic draft here live on the show. That I'm in, and that is a 14-team special, super deep 3-flex league. I started Jordan Thomas at one of my flexes this week and came through. There it is.
Dude, I'm sorry, the chat room is cracking me up right now. You guys are money in the chat room.
This is why,
right
guys, you got to get in when we tweet out. Hey, like most every Tuesday night now, about 9:00 East, 8 Central, we're going to be here doing the hustle. And just come in and hang out in the chat room, man. It's blowing up. There's a bazillion guys talking in here. So it's fun. Let's see. Let's keep rocking and rolling through some of these.
There's a question about Goddard. Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, so on Goddard, the good news is the Eagles did come out and they did what they said they were going to do. And they actually did run, the 12 personnel, a ton, last week. So they ran 12 personnel, 57% of the snaps. So still you got almost half the plays where you don't have 2 tight ends on the field, but you have one or the other. And that was still in this particular game. Now, I don't know that Ertz really looks better than Goddard anymore. So I think it kind of depends. Like there's some weird stuff going on there. I heard he got in a shouting match with Roseman last week. So, I don't know. You probably know you're closer to that, Drake. But what I'll say is, on the plays that I saw, and I'll be honest, I haven't got to go back and watch all of the Eagles game. But on the few plays I saw, just
turn it off at halftime
Sunday afternoon and, red zone, he looked really good. I mean, Goddard looked good. He looked like, the guy that's got the juice. He's got the legs. But, he only ran a route on 62% of dropbacks, was out there for 81% of the snaps. So yes, there's a question in the chat room, what did it look like, snaps to routes ran? He was being asked to stay in and block more often than Ertz. Ertz, 85% of the snaps, 74% of the routes. And so 60% route range, remember, is usually not good for a tight end unless you're going to catch, some touchdowns or your name is Mark Andrews, right? Which he did that last year on 61%. He was like, tight end 2 or tight end 3, depending on your format. So with Goddard, be careful. Don't go blow all your free agent money. He's definitely a player I would like to roster because Ertz is a little older too, man. If Ertz goes down, Goddard is top 6 immediately, maybe in the top 3 conversation. So that's the thing with Goddard. You can play in. You can use him as your tight end some. You're going to have some of the boom bust weeks, but man, where I like carrying him is my second tight end. He does my bye week thing for me. If he gets hot, great, I can still use him. But man, if Ertz goes down, boom, pretty much there's nobody I can own other than, the top 3 or 4 that I'm not going to bench for him.
A lot of people in the chat room are curious about Kareem Hunt. So let's get into the Browns here before we move off of running back. Give me your input on Kareem Hunt, on Nick Chubb, this Browns backfield. Are we worried? Is everything okay? Should we abandon ship and try to trade guys? What say you?
Well, the problem is you can't trade a guy like when the value's low, right? So that's not going to matter. Here's what I'm going to say, about the situation. So everybody said Kareem Hunt is going to get all these receiving opportunities because he's going to play receiver and slot because when they get behind, wow, they don't have a third receiver. They're going to use Kareem Hunt. Well, they didn't. He played 4 snaps as a receiver yesterday. If he's going to play a receiver in any game this year, it was yesterday. And, they're going to be on the field together. 2 snaps. Only 2 snaps out of that whole freaking blowout did they have those 2 guys on the field together. So what I see is Kareem Hunt is the 2-minute back, and he was yesterday. But we talked about that, right? We said he's going to be the passing downs guy, and he was. 100% of those snaps when they were in the 2-minute offense, it was all him. On 3rd and 4th and long, it was 75% Kareem Hunt. We talked about that as well. Obvious passing downs, probably going to be Kareem Hunt because he's a really good receiver out of the backfield. Nick Chubb was only 25%. So carries inside the 5 or snaps inside the 5. They both had a snap inside the 5 and Hunt got a carry inside the 5, which was a touchdown. So that could be problematic for Nick Chubb. We'll see what happens with that. But Chubb had a couple of longer gains that were really tough runs on that drive. And honestly, I think he was gassed, when I was watching the game, but I could be wrong. I'm trying to not be biased, in any way, but here's what I want to see. This week, they play the Bengals. I am starting Nick Chubb everywhere. No questions asked. This is going to be a better game script. It's going to be either close or they're going to get out ahead. And here's what my bet is, that when they're in close games or when they're ahead, you're going to see Chubb's going to get 65 to 70% of the attempts. He'll probably run routes on 30% of the plays, and Hunt will get the others. But on the weeks where, the offense is clicking, I think you're going to be fine, with Nick Chubb. You got to avoid the weeks like yesterday. And we talked about that, as much as we love Nick Chubb, we talked about it on the show. When that kind of week happens, you're not going to like owning Nick Chubb. It just so happens that you drew the freaking Ravens on week 1. Now, if next week comes out and they blow out, the Bengals, and it still looks like this, where it's split 50-50, well, then I was wrong, on Kareem Hunt, and he should have been a good draft pick in round 5. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they have him for his role, and he gets plenty of work through it. But it's going to be game to game who's getting more work based on the game script is what I'm anticipating.
A couple of guys in the chat room here. One guy asked, would you start Hunt on Thursday or risk waiting for Connor on Sunday? I think you have to start Hunt there if you don't have any other options. You can't wait.
If you can pick up Snell or Brown or any of those other guys, I would rather play them than Kareem Hunt. Here's my problem with Kareem Hunt. Could you have asked for a better game? Like they got their wheels blown off. He got so much work in the second half. And did you feel good if you started in this weekend? I know a lot of people, oh man, look at Kareem Hunt. Yeah. Were you excited to have him in your flex play there, bud? No, you weren't. And if the game goes the other way, he's going to be Chubb. I think he'll be the guy with 5 or 6. This is not like last year. We explained this multiple times on the show. This offense does not run that way where you're getting both guys on the field all the time because they want to have 2 tight ends to help block or they want to have a fullback on the field. That's the way the offense is designed. I'm sorry. You can be mad at me. You can hate me for it. I don't make the rules, but go watch the way Shanahan's offense runs. Watch the way Kubiak's offense runs. Everything's keyed on the defense thinking they don't know. Is it a run or a pass? As soon as you put them out there together, either one, you tip off that it's a pass, or number 2, if you try to run, you don't have the extra blocker you want. It's just the way it works. So you're not going to see them both on the field, together. That was what idiots do, like Freddie Kitchens. And, Kevin Stefanski, he's still, who knows? He's a young coach. He just learned this scheme last year, but I think he definitely wants to stick with it. The positive I'll say is the Browns' offensive line still played well. So
I want to hear what the chat room thinks about this. Here's a question from a guy, Steven Dominguez, longtime fan of the show. Would you drop, we'll assume it's PPR, would you drop Kareem Hunt for Nyheim Hines? That's an interesting question.
I'm not doing it, and here's why. Because if Chubb goes down, he is a league winner. Nyheim Hines is not a league winner. And I could be wrong. They could come out next week and beat the Bengals by 30, and we come back on the show next week, and we're like, well, there it went again, and it was split, and guess what? It was better for both of them. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, don't start Nick Chubb on weeks where they're going to get beat, and you can start Kareem Hunt every week. That's in the range of possibility. I don't think it's happening, but it's not a bet my house on it kind of thing, if you know what I mean. So I'm still going to keep Hunt. I definitely want to roster Nyheim Hines any way I can. I just think cutting Hunt is, even though you may have overpaid to get him in your draft, he really should have been like a 7th, 8th round pick to me.
Yeah. Got to be somebody else.
It doesn't matter. At this point, you've drafted him, and he still has the upside that you always knew that he had. It's like you're not going to cut Alexander Madison. Why would you cut Kareem Hunt? I'm not.
What if I told you guys out there that on the waiver wire, I guarantee you, this guy's available. He saw almost 60% of his team's carries and ran for 93 yards, and you can get him this week basically with any waiver claim in your league. You'd be like, hell yeah, sign me up. That guy's Adrian Peterson. 93 yards and saw nearly 60% of the Lions' carries. They went, of course you would do that because you spent a 2nd-round pick on DeAndre Swift, who dropped a game winner, and you have Kerryon Johnson. I think, to me, Dwayne, Kerryon Johnson, it's over. He's done. Forget about it. And AP's not going to go away. He's going to have this grinder role, I think, all season long. And if he stays healthy, we said this last year. Oh, he's in Washington. Nobody wants him. Forget about it. What did he do? The guy still runs for 1,000 yards. And he's going to do it again this year.
Yeah. I mean,
you don't want him.
I don't think he's going to get it. I don't think he's going to get 1,000 yards, but I mean, is he going to get 700 to 800 yards and he has a chance to score 10 touchdowns if the Lions offense can get healthy and get Galladay back and do the things we know they're capable of doing? They really missed Galladay yesterday. I mean, Hawkinson was great. Marvin Jones came through. Danny Amendola even stepped up, on Sunday, but they lost that element that, really, evens out the playing field and makes defenses have to respect, the whole plane. So for Peterson, yeah, man, you're right. If I really just need, somebody to fill in, to get me, somewhere because I'm waiting on somebody to come back, you could do worse. I mean, they play the Packers this week. Look, the Packers, yes, they did really good last week, but if you can shut down Devontae Adams, you're going to give the Packers serious problems. So there are going to be games where the Packers are really going to struggle. Aaron Rodgers is going to be a roller coaster just like last year. Remember, guys, last year, Aaron Rodgers, I want to say, had 4 weeks where he was the number 1 or 3 quarterback. Mm-hmm. The rest of the weeks, he was either like down at 18 or he was at like 25.
Yeah.
Again, it's a game script and the way that things work, So, I mean, this week it worked out. Rodgers was hot. Hey, it was fine. He's a great DFS play because nobody ever wants to own him and you get to sack him with one of the best receivers in the game. So it's fine from that perspective. But as far as, Peterson, this week, it's a little bit of a tougher matchup, but I'm fine with it. It's okay. I mean, while we're here, though, let's hit on Swift. So here's the deal with Swift. Yes, he's been hurt. They're bringing him along slowly, but here's the awesome part about this guy, Drake. So Swift is already getting all the third down work. 2-minute offense, 100% of the snaps to Swift, right? If you look at third down and long, he's already 60% of the offense. So Carryon got a little bit of that. The guy that you need to trust in pass blocking, to run the right route, to get your hots, all that stuff that hasn't been able to be on the field, they're already trusting him with the part that's typically the hardest for most rookies, right? Yes, he dropped a pass in the end zone that could have won the game for the Lions. It happens. It just happened to be in a huge moment. Players drop balls. I mean, it happens every week. Some of them are more noticeable than others, but I really love Swift. Like, if you can buy low on Swift, I'm doing it, because if he starts to pick up the rest of this, I don't think, to your point, I think they'll keep somebody else engaged, to help keep guys healthy. But I won't be surprised, Drake, if he pushes up to 40, 50% of the carries and just basically becomes everything passing. He just takes it all. And if that happens, I mean, he's going to be the RB2, that we wanted. So if you can buy low on Swift, you can go to an owner in your league and be like, yeah, man, that guy, he's terrible. He dropped a ball. I mean, I guess I'll take him. You want to throw him in, ask for him as a throw in. That's always the best way to get somebody. Well, will you throw this guy in? It's like you don't really like him. But anyway, I was very encouraged by what I saw with Swift, because, dude, he's been limited, for how long? And he missed 2 weeks of practice as a rookie. And to be trusted the way he was, huge fan, of Swift.
Let's move it over to wide receiver now. Boy, it was a big week for kind of secondary guys on teams having monster games, and now they're all waiver wire viable. So let's hit on a few of those guys, and let's start in Atlanta with Russell Gage. This is a guy that had 9 receptions on 12 targets for 114 yards. Last year, 5 of his last 6 games, he had at least 6 targets, including week 13, which was without Calvin Ridley. Week 17, excuse me, he had 13 targets. So Russell Gage, and with Hayden Hurst kind of not playing that third receiver role, I don't know if he can get 12 targets a week like Ridley and Julio got also, but this team sucks. They're going to throw it 50 times a week. I mean, is it possible Russell Gage becomes a top 30 wide receiver just based on GTP volume?
I mean, I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely. He again, they do suck, so this could happen often. But I mean, he got a ton of garbage time. No receiver, if you exclude touchdowns, and I'm just looking for utilization, right? Targets, and yards, but mostly just targets. Nobody has helped more than Russell Gage in trash time, this last week. If you want true fantasy points, you could say Calvin Ridley was helped the most. Now, Adam Thielen also caught a very late bomb, but those guys were heavily involved before that. Right. It's not like their utilization shot up. Their utilization was steady throughout the game. Russell Gage's was kind of, and then it went up, once they got down. And so that could happen some more. But again, I do worry about Hayden Hurst. He had, so Gage ran a route on 82%, the dropbacks. Julio Jones, 84%. Calvin Ridley, 89%. We saw that last year. They do like to get 3 guys involved. Hayden Hurst ran a route on 80% of dropbacks, which is positive. He wasn't having to stay back and block all the time. So the Falcons offensive line is doing a little bit better this year. That was a real problem for them last year. They have a young offensive line that could trend upwards. So on Gage, I'm not going to go pay for what we would think a 13 target player, would normally cost. I'm definitely not paying that price, but I'm fine. If you really think you need a receiver, you're going to have to pick the weeks, which could be often, where you think that they're either in a shootout or they get down. I think you're still going to get the weeks where you're going to be like, man, that sucked. 5 catches for 30 yards. I guess 8 points isn't terrible. I'm just saying don't go wild on him. But would I be surprised if we get to the end of the year and we're like, wow, man, dude caught, 60 balls, for 600 yards and 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. I think that's totally possible. If he outdoes that, I mean, Hayden Hurst is a ghost.
Yeah, really.
Ridley and Julio are getting theirs. They're going to get theirs. So it's a matter of, the other 2. Now, Dirk Cotter, remember we talked about this last year, he likes to spread it around. So there's room for another guy to be involved. There really is. He doesn't like to force it all to one player. But Ridley and Julio still end up being ranked really high just because of the volume. And we saw it again. I mean, this team runs a boatload of plays, Drake. I mean, they throw the ball a ton. So even though you may only get 20 to 25% of the targets each week, it ends up being a lot of targets in the end because of how many passes they throw.
Dwayne, do you know how to spell victory lap? P-A-R-R-I-S. Campbell. Paris Campbell. There it is, my friend. You've been on this guy for, a year or two now? Jesus. He was kind of banged up last year, but you liked him and you pumped him up all preseason and leads the way, tied with T.Y. Hilton, 9 targets here in week 1. But man, oh man, 6 catches, 71 yards, 95% of the snaps, playing out of the slot. Take a bow, my friend. This one's on you.
Hey, man, it was a perfect fit, right? I mean, they needed someone to win, the number 2 role. He operates in an area that Phillip Rivers likes, and he has a lot of juice. I mean, what else do you want? I mean, a player that, is very explosive that's going to be, you think, involved in the offense. So, man, I'm excited to own him. I own him more than any other player besides Josh Kelly. Those are my 2 guys. And look, guys, there's lots of ways to win fantasy leagues. But one of the things I always looked at, like when I was looking for my advice, look, people are the early picks are just trying to not miss on a lot of it. So if you think about a lot of the guys, Drake, we didn't want to take around the turn. It wasn't because we didn't like them. We were just like, well, we have questions. We're not sure. Are they going to have this role? Are they going to have that role? Well, I know this receiver is going to be everything. So I'll just take the receiver, right? It was kind of like, you could argue that any way you want. And so I think where it really comes down is being able to find, some of, these other things that you're getting way later than the rest of your peers, right? And now you're just like piling them on top of everything you already drafted. And even if you didn't nail the early draft, but you got a lot of good players and now you add these on top, then all of a sudden this is how you win leagues. But yes, for Paris Campbell, man, super excited. If he's on the waiver wire, I mean, I'm trying to think through it because I am, biased, but I'm thinking, 30% minimum, depending on your roster. I might even do a little bit more, but I mean, I feel like, the games are coming, man, where we're going to be like, man, Paris Campbell, 8 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like he's going to have the blow up weeks because he can score from anywhere. So it's just going to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen every single week, but he also got to carry, they're moving him all over the formation. Drake, he ran 56% of his routes against linebackers and safeties. Who else does that?
It was Chris Godwin, right? Back in the day.
Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin. We can talk about him later. Guess who didn't do that this weekend? Chris Godwin. Guess who struggled a little bit? Chris Godwin. But Campbell, man, like everything lines up. He's getting the snaps, he's getting the routes, he's getting the targets. They're throwing the ball all the time despite being in a close game. That was my main worry with Campbell. Wasn't really necessarily him. I mean, where you got him, you could just release him if he didn't do well. But I was like, man, if they do stick more with the run like they did with Brissett, it brings these targets, even though he may get 20, 30%, it still caps, what you can do. But just when you get a player, Drake, that's highly involved and they are also explosive, then, I mean, you got to figure out how to get them on your team.
I don't know. Will Smith somewhere is smiling because we're doubling down on the Miami talk here. Preston Williams is a guy who didn't do much of anything here in week 1, but we've got Devontae Parker dealing with a hammy. So Preston Williams, a guy who could be thrust into a prime role this week. And another name out there, Isaiah Ford, was a slot receiver, played nearly 100% of the snaps for the Dolphins. What do you think about the role of these Dolphins pass catchers if Parker's banged up? You trying to add them?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt Preston Williams is available, but you'd have to be in a really shallow league. I mean, towards the end of draft season, he was going in the 9th and 10th rounds, like in 12-team leagues with, like 2 flex spots. So, I mean, people were pretty sharp on him once they knew he was healthy. He's a player that a lot of people liked. They just didn't know how healthy he was going to be. So as more news came out about being ready for week 1, his ADP just continued to rise. But He's obviously healthy, dude. Out there for 90% of the snaps, ran a route on 97% of the dropbacks. So, I mean, they're obviously not worried about it. 21% of the targets, led the team. Ryan Fitzpatrick was terrible. Only 33% of his passes that he was targeted with were catchable. Fitz was just majorly off. But it was a tough matchup. Week 1, he also drew Gilmore, I think, once Parker left. So that didn't help. But yeah, absolutely. If Preston Williams is available, dude, he's probably going to be 10 or 11 targets as long as Fitzpatrick's playing and Parker's not. I mean, 10 to 12 targets is probably a lock.
Better late than never here on our victory laps. Last year, one of the receivers we were all in on was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and he shit the bed, and we will freely admit that. But looking good in week 1 here is the deep threat for the Packers. He gets a just awful Lions secondary this coming week, so maybe he does it again. Are you going back to the well on our boy MVS?
In a super deep league, I would roster him. Man, it sucks because I drafted him at the end of a ton of drafts this year and last week when I had to. So what I do, like another little insight, like for people, you probably saw some of my draft boards. I don't ever draft a second quarterback. I draft as many guys as I can until I hear all the news down till, basically the Thursday before games start. And when the first waiver runs, then I go back and reevaluate all my rosters based on all the information that I have, and I cut a player to pick up my second quarterback. And sometimes I won't do it, but this year I had to with COVID. I wasn't going to risk, all of a sudden, Saturday morning when I can't make pickups anymore in these particular leagues that I'm in, and, my starting quarterback's out. So I couldn't do that. In a normal year, I'll even wait, until the first run of waivers for week 1. But this year I had to do it, ahead of time for sure on all my teams. And man, MVS was the guy I cut the most. And I'm okay with it. He's going to cost some money, but he was only out there for 53% of the snaps, 66% of the routes, had 15% of the targets. What I do like though is to your point, he showed a little juice. He got deep. He had a really good catch deep, actually, tracked the ball well, create a little bit of a separation. If you're watching the Cowboy game, I guess you call that offensive PI against Jalen Ramsey.
Oh, he totally pushed off. Give me a break.
Yeah, different ref, in this game.
How about that Dallas Goedert offensive PI last year? Was that a penalty?
Oh, absolutely. That was a penalty. But, with Valdez-Scantling, we know the talent's there. Now Lazard, Lazard played good too. And he was out there he ran a route on 86% of dropbacks. Adams was 98%. So, Scantling's a guy, if you're in a deep league, pick him up, but you're going to have a hard time wanting to start him until you get a little more comfortable. Remember, the Packers don't run 11 all the time. They come out in 12, 21, and 11. Like, actually, this is the other cool thing. I haven't been sharing all this because some of this, I have to actually save for a column.
Somebody asked about that. When's your column coming out with the utilization report on?
I'm supposed to finish it tonight, but I'm exhausted, so I'll probably wake up and finish it in the morning, and that means it won't be edited until tomorrow afternoon. But the who was I talking about, Drake? What team were we talking
MVS.
about? Packers.
MVS and Lazard.
A long day between normal work and then doing this as soon as I got off. But so on the Packers. Yesterday, they ran 11, 42% of their snaps. They ran 12, 29%, and they ran 21, 17%. And then they ran other, which is mostly all jumbo stuff, 12%. So they use all these different formations, all these different packages. So that's the thing. You want to own one of the two receivers that stays out there in the 12 and the 21 sets, and that's Lazard right now. So MVS, great stash, but don't go overspend on him. If Lazard were to go down, he's obviously going to be the next guy up. If something injury-wise happens to a tight end or a fullback, you could all of a sudden see more 11. There's different ways doors could open for MVS. And I still like him. I still think he has talent. People forget he got hurt really early out of the gate, and he didn't make a big deal out of it. And so he was playing hurt, kind of lost confidence in himself. Rodgers lost confidence, so he struggled last year. But he has shown a little bit.
Mm-hmm. We can tie two guys in together here. We can talk about DJ Moore, who I know is a favorite of yours, by talking about Robbie Anderson, because Robbie Anderson had a 6 for 115 and 1 showing on Sunday. 75 of that came basically on one play. So it kind of blew up his stat line a little bit. Do you think Robbie Anderson who was basically the Jets' one for a few years, is going to be involved enough in on a team that's very bad in Carolina, but we don't necessarily think they're going to get their tight end involved from what we saw this past weekend. So you've got DJ Moore. Are we worried about him? I know you and I were texting about it. And then what do we think of Robbie Anderson? Oh, Curtis Samuel, he's still there too.
Yeah. Well, they ran 11 on 65% of their snaps. So you'd like to see it up like in the 70s, would be better when you're talking about 3 wide receivers. So, and this was in a game where they were trailing 75% of the plays. The good news is for the Panthers, when the game was close, when the game was within 3, which for them was, 25% of their plays. They never led, but they were either trailing or the game was within 3. 75% of the time in that close situation, which is basically a neutral game strip, 75% of the time they were passing. So they're going to throw the ball a ton.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see not the type of pace that we saw like out of the Falcons and, even the Lions this weekend, the Titans, they're not going to be that high, but 65 plays is still pretty good. And then if you look at, what happened, with their receivers during the game, DJ Moore is the guy that was always out there, ran a route on 95% of dropbacks. Robbie Anderson was next at 90%. The guy that's leaving the field when 11 is not a thing is Curtis Samuel. So he was out there for 74% of snaps, ran a route on 74% of dropbacks. So Samuel had 21% of the targets, Robbie Anderson had 24%, and DJ Moore had 27%. Some people went, oh, that doesn't sound right. Well, it's because remember with the PFF data, if it wasn't truly a target, it was a throwaway or something else. It doesn't, count as a target. So your denominator becomes a little bit smaller because you're not just dividing by the number of pass attempts in the game. It's actually truly targets. So anyway, it's relevant, right? It goes against, everybody will sound like they're 2% higher than what you probably normally hear. But the thing I would say, Drake, is Moore's fine. I think it's so funny. Like some of the stuff I see on Twitter, it's like, man, I'm worried about DJ Moore. And I'm like, well, are you worried about Chris Godwin? Look, I can name a million receivers this weekend that didn't even get the volume that Samuel did that I would be worried about, right? Godwin got less volume. He ended up with, more catches. But he wasn't as involved. He wasn't as involved. He also didn't get the juicy looks on the inside that Arian said we were still going to get. He didn't get them. He was being asked to do different things. So there's a lot of receivers that you look at that went in that range, outside of Juju Smith-Schuster and Adam Thielen, where it's like, a lot of them were similar, in their production this weekend. But at least, DJ Moore had, the target. So I feel fine.
He dropped a touchdown. Actually, there was a play right on the goal line. The defender broke it up. If he scores there, everyone's like, "Oh, great, another big day for DJ."
Exactly. So if somebody wants to trade you, DJ Moore, absolutely go get him. Look, the guy in his second year was in the top 15 wide receivers. The guy as a rookie was in the top 36. Like, you don't do that. Like, I'm sorry, he's really good. And I know people want to cling to, well, Curtis Samuel, I love him. I really love him. Great. I love Curtis Samuel too, and he's a guy that I kept trying to draft, but DJ Moore is the main guy in this offense. The other thing, Drake, that's interesting, so Christian McCaffrey, man, only 12% of the targets. Are they trying to let him carry the ball more and target him a little bit less because now they're trying to get a guy like Robbie Anderson, more involved? I don't know. But that's where the targets came from. That's what's funny. Everybody's like, oh man, DJ Moore. I'm like, well, if we look at it, the guy that's down is McCaffrey. 12%. This guy's a 20% target share guy.
He got bailed out with 2 short touchdowns.
Yeah, and he still looked good, dude. He looked good. McCaffrey's still RB1 all the way. But they could be moving to an offense where they don't utilize him quite as much in the passing game. They want to use him a little more in the running game. That opens up some snaps for others. And I heard people even Sigmund Bloom, on Twitter, and I responded to it. He was like, yeah, it's not the start you wanted, for DJ Moore. And, because he talked about the 3 receivers. And then if you go look back at last year, Drake, in week 1, DJ Moore was the same way. But guess who the third person was? It was Greg Olson, not Robbie Anderson. So it kind of plays mind games on people. Mm-hmm. The same thing happened last year. you came out of the gate with 3 guys with 20% of the targets. It was DJ Moore, Greg Olson, and Christian McCaffrey. And you had Curtis Samuel nipping at their heels for the next spot. And so it was okay then because Olson's not a receiver, I guess. I don't know. So I feel like Narrative Street sometimes can, and I don't mean that in any kind of bad way. I think it's easy. I do it on things. Everybody does it. But for me, like DJ Moore's fine. I love him. I'm still feeling great about taking him in the late 3rd through the mid 4th. Maybe we'll change that here in a few weeks, but there's no evidence to say we're not going to like DJ Moore.
A lot of guys asking about tight end. So let's hit that. Okay. Some guys who might be on the wire: OJ Howard, Greg Olson, Jimmy Graham, Logan Thomas for Washington. Of all those guys, my preference, I think Logan Thomas can be a player all year long. They're devoid of talent really outside of McLaurin, and he led the team in targets. And OJ Howard, I know you're going to have some great stats on him and what he did with Gronk. That would be my play at the position.
Yeah, I like Howard. I think it's just going to be really tough, like when you look at the underlying, data. So we didn't get what Arian said we would get. Now, maybe that's because, let me pop back over here real quick, Drake, and pull back up the Bucs like at the team level. So yesterday, the Bucs trailed, to be fair, on 78% of plays. 51 of their snaps out of 65, they were losing by more than 3 points. So 4 points or more. They were within 3 points for 11 plays, and they led for only 3 plays by more than 4 points. So really, I mean, we don't know for sure what Tampa Bay's strategy is. I think they had to kind of get away from 12 and get Scotty Miller involved more, right? Because you needed somebody else to help stretch the field vertically, especially with Evans, having hamstring problems.
Is that a guy you'd add? I skipped over him to try to get the tight end, but Scotty Miller?
Only in super deep leagues. I think once Evans is completely healthy, I think Scotty Miller is, 5th in line at best. Okay. But this past weekend, my point was going to be they ran 12 personnel only on 25% of the snaps. 11 was 65%. So I think some of that is game script, but we were told, right, that 12 personnel was going to be their base formation. Maybe Arians is confused and thinks base formation means the first play he runs, just like some coaches think the first running back on the field's the starter, even though they don't, play as much as the other guy. I don't know. Or it could have just been game script. So we'll have to wait and see. So that makes me a little bit nervous, though, with OJ Howard, because he only ran a route on 46% of the snaps, Drake. That's not very good. Mm-hmm. He was a target on 18% because Brady does like him. So I think he's going to be leveraged. The other thing with Gronk, man, he is in OJ Howard's spot from last year now. 77% of the snaps. He only got to run a route on 51%. He is an Arians tight end gel. He's blocking. Mm-hmm. Gronk, hey, you want to unretire? Yeah, man, I'll pair up with Tom.
Come play left tackle for me.
Come block some guys.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Gronk was only out there in the 2-minute offense for 47% of the plays. That's where he and Howard truly did, split, their role. But their routes per dropback were pretty close, So both guys, Gronk is not startable, right now. No. Because they're obviously asking him to stay in. And remember, that's because they like to push the ball vertical. That's the deal with Arians' offense. So you said Greg Olson. So real quick, I'll chat about Greg Olson. He's still splitting time, basically, with Disley. That was the main thing we were looking for, right? Ran a route on 56% of the dropbacks. Again, that's low. He only played on 66% of the snaps. Disley was out there 43%. So I like Olson, but again, going to be tough to trust him unless you're just hoping you get a touchdown, which he did bail you out. And, he looked okay. Again, utilization is kind of an issue there. Who else did you name, Drake? You named
Logan Thomas, and then I've got two more guys I'm going to crowbar in.
I have to remember this is a football team now. I just got to go back to F. So Logan Thomas, so 86 ran around on 86%, right, of dropbacks. Target share of 27%. Wow,
he looks good, man. He looks like a big receiver
inside the 5. He played 75% of snaps. He didn't get he got one target in the end zone, and he was 100%. He was the only guy on the whole team that got a target in the end zone. Unfortunately, Dwayne Haskins, got a little better towards the end of the game, but did not play well. Only 50% of the balls that he threw to Logan Thomas were catchable, which is really bad because for tight ends, usually that number's like up in the 70s.
Haskins
it was 50%. So yeah, Logan Thomas, man. Again, you probably don't spend a ton of money on him, but he's kind of a cool story. You know, he's a quarterback coming out of college. He was a big, huge athlete. He's been a tight end project for like 6 years, man. 5 or 6 years. This guy's been a tight end project on taxi squad or on practice squads, you know, bouncing from team to team. Detroit, he flashed again last year, and now he's got his chance. So it's a really cool story. He's a guy that you can definitely get for cheap. I mean, you're not going to love playing him, you know, every week, but if the Redskins offense slowly improves, he definitely looks like he's the guy right now besides McLaurin. I will say, you know, I know it's a receiver, but Steven Sims was out there all the time like we thought. So he's eventually going to get some. We just need Dwayne Haskins to be better. And he did get better at the end of the game, but man, that first half was like, you watched it. It was bad. Yeah. It was very bad.
The Eagles turned the ball over, set them up in plus territory multiple times with turnovers. But we're all about winning you guys fantasy leagues here on the Hustle. But more importantly, we're trying to win me a fantasy league. So selfishly, I'm going to ask Dwayne about my 2 tight ends, which are Chris Herndon and Mike Gaseki. So a lot of chat in the group here on YouTube. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us out. You'll get notifications when we go live and everything. So we'll love you for that. So Herndon had a brutal matchup with Buffalo, but he got some targets. He's out there. They are kind of devoid of talent, and we know where Darnold likes to throw the ball, which is the middle of the field. Mike Gaseki down in Miami. Now we've got Parker out, so they're going to need an option. Maybe he plays a big slot a la Eric Decker in that Changale offense. Tell me I'm not crazy for keeping these 2 guys on my roster, Dwayne, please.
No, I think you're fine. I mean, the thing with Herndon, he's dealing with what some of these other guys are dealing with. When you play on a bad offensive line, you have to stay in and block. He played 72% of the snaps, ran a route on 56%, you know, of dropbacks. So that number's got to come up. Towards the end of the game, he did most of his damage. But he's a guy that Gase has said openly, and Gase, when does Gase ever even say this about anybody? But he's gushed, you know, about Chris Herndon. So we know he's got plans for him. You know, he was open on 86% of his targets. So open means he had 2 or more steps of separation. Wow. We know Darnold likes to work inside the hashes. So I like Herndon still. He's got to get the routes ran, you know, per drop back. The routes run per drop back, that number's got to come up. You know, his snaps could come up a little bit too, but I mean, I'm fine with them working some guys in to keep people fresh, especially if you're having to block a lot. Like Ryan Griffin played 32% and Wesco played 15%, you know, of the snaps. So they have 2 other guys they kind of like to use. But I'm hoping they just basically unlock Herndon. But I think it's going to depend on the offensive line, man. You know, they've got a really bad line. They've got some young talent that could help. They signed people in the offseason, but it hasn't had a chance to gel yet. And then as far as Gaseki goes, yeah, I mean, I like Gaseki. I actually liked Gaseki this weekend just because the Patriots basically had a complete rehaul, right, at linebacker. We didn't even know who was going to we weren't for sure who was going to start outside of Juwan Bentley. Who's not necessarily like a coverage maven, or at least he hadn't been. You never know what Bill Belichick's, you know, going to turn somebody into. You know, he like duct tape stuff together, and you're just like, wow, that looks pretty good. Like he's the complete opposite of, you know, like basically Adam Gase. But as far as, you know, Gaseki goes from the standpoint of his snaps, played 71%, but he was in a route on 79%. That's what I like about him. He's a receiver. They know he's a receiver. They don't ask him to block. He's not good at it. So you don't have to worry about it, right? He had 17%, you know, of the targets. And he had their only end zone target, which is where he's going to continue to be used. You know, his catchable pass rate from you know, Fitzpatrick, it wasn't great for a tight end, 60%, but it was far better than, you know, some of the other guys I named to you earlier because Fitzpatrick did not have a good day. So yeah, I think Gaseki is easily a top 2 target in the offense until Devontae Parker's back.
If you need a defense this week, go look at the LA Rams. They're playing against the Eagles, and this is all you need to know. Aaron Donald is going up against something called Nate Herbig, who is playing this Sunday in his 2nd NFL start, and he is horrible. So there will probably be another 10 sacks, and if Carson Wentz makes it out alive, it will be a miracle. Dwayne, you want to do a little rundown of some of your adapt or die guys?
Yeah, hit me.
Okay. Well, we can kind of go through this rapid fire. we could talk. These are guys that we liked in the preseason. Dwain was on, and you can kind of just give us a quick hit. Boom, things were going the right direction. Maybe we were on the right track, or we got to pull back a little bit. CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, great. Cowboys ran 11 personnel, 83% of the snaps. He didn't get the big play. I mean, he did have a on-play action. He had a 33-yard gain, but he was still the second most targeted player on the team behind Amari Cooper. And it's what I talked about. When Amari's not being shadowed and all of a sudden Jalen Ramsey's on Michael Gallup ball game. Mm-hmm. Now, he did get the offensive PI late in the game, Drake, which was not one. But anyway, he did get past, Ramsey there, but whatever. Maybe it was just pass interference, but he was able to get by him. So Gallup's still going to be fine, but I love Lamb. I have no problem with it. I mean, Jarwin's gone now. So you got Dalton Schultz as your next tight end. Jerry Jones has already said they're not going to sign anybody, at least not right away, to come in and, play tight end or linebacker or right tackle, which is whatever. If we want to go 0-3, but anyway, yeah, I'm fine with Lamb, dude. I love him. If we were drafting again today, I would probably draft him maybe a round earlier because now I know for sure how much 11 personnel they're going to run.
How about another rookie wide receiver, this time in Vegas, Henry Ruggs? Hopefully he's okay with a scare with a knee.
Dude, love him. I love him because of what they're doing. They're not just working him shallow. They actually are using him on these deep crossers. They ran 37% play action yesterday. That was the second most outside of the Patriots in the entire league. Now, Gruden was real balanced. It was 50% run, 50% pass. Now, they were really close in the game the whole way. And they never – I thought it was strange, Drake, that as much as people were all excited about the Raiders, they couldn't put the Panthers away. The Panthers have some nice offensive players, but it's a new offense with new players and a new quarterback. It's a new defense with a ton of guys they lost. There's some young talent on defense, but this is a team that literally everything is new. And the Raiders barely eked it out, really, in the end. Josh Jacobs had a freaking day. But, yeah, we can talk about him.
Josh Jacobs, I went up against him.
But, I went up against Jacobs and Devontae Adams on a couple teams where they had both.
Well, let's talk about Jacobs because he's got a brutal schedule coming up, by the way. I think they've got the Chiefs and a bunch of playoff teams. So we'll see if this pass game holds up because that's always been the knock. That's what's held Jacobs back from really being that premier back is can he get a role in the pass game? And Dwain, he got a role in the pass game.
Yeah, but did he is the question. They never trailed. So if you look at the stuff that I can pull now, when it was 3rd and 4th and long, not Josh Jacobs. Not the dude.
So when his looks, so he's getting his looks early downs. So kind of going,
Now, what I'll say that's positive, the looks he got. So I believe I have to go back and look again. He had 5 targets. 3 of those, he was the first read, which that doesn't happen for running backs, right? Unless it's a hot or it's designed for the running back. So it's a real tell when I go in and I look at running backs, and this will be part of what you'll get in the utilization report that nobody else has this data, only Pro Football Focus. It's a real tell for running backs when you see that they're the first read because most running backs are checkdowns. And so the highest percentage of their targets will come from checkdowns. However, when you see the outliers like Kamara, McCaffrey, last year, Eckler, these are guys that are actually being integrated into the passing game and they're designing plays for them. That happened this last weekend for Chase Edmonds. Kenyon Drake's fine. He's going to be great. What they're doing though, when they do put Edmonds on the field, he had 5 targets. 3 of them, he was the first read. So, and one of them, right, was a touchdown reception where they came out in that crazy, full house kind of look. But anyway, back to Jacobs. Here's what we got to see. Look, you're starting him every week, man. You drafted him, and he had a great game, and he blew up. But people forget he blew up in week 1 last year. And then what happened when they came back the next week and the Chiefs freaking blew their wheels off? He sucked. So I want to see, and they play the Saints this weekend. It's going to be a better matchup. Now they're going to be without Thomas. The Saints may be off their game a little bit, but I want to see them get behind, and I want to see what Josh Jacobs' role is. Now, doesn't really matter for season long. You either own him or you don't, right? I own him on a few teams, and so I'm rooting that we know he can do it. That's what's funny. People are like, man, he can catch. Well, we've never said he can't. We know that. And, I do the show with Matt Waldman. He loves him and says he's a great receiver. I defer to Matt on film. So I love Jacob's skill set. I think he could be a top 3, top 4 back, in the league. And look, this last weekend, they ran the ball 51% of plays. Gruden wanted to smash the ball, and it was a game script where they could. We just have to see what happens when all of a sudden they get punched in the face and they're down by 14. How involved will Josh Jacobs be then? I think Jacobs is going to catch more balls than last year, but we already said that. I just said I didn't think he was going to be, over 60 balls like some people, because he said that was his goal, right? 60. I'm like, well, I don't see him getting over it. I think he's going to have a tough time getting to it. I could see him getting to 40, 45 just off the design looks that he's getting on earlier downs. But to get to that 60, to try to get above that 60, he has to take this other job away from Richard. And guess what, man? There's a third guy involved, like always, Drake. Devontae Booker. He's the new DeAndre Washington. It's going to be a pain in the ass, I'm telling you. I think Jacob's going to catch more balls, and I haven't even said anything on Twitter because I was honestly saving this. So great. You guys get to hear it on the show, and I'm going to put it in the article. But I think there's still a major question. And so for DFS purposes, last week it was great because you knew the script was going to be there. This weekend without Michael Thomas, maybe it's a little bit better. And I haven't looked at Jacob's salary. He's probably going to be overutilized this weekend, on the chance that he trails, and we just don't know. Now he could do it. And next week we come back and great, we adapt or we die again. But right now, all I can do is give you the information I have. And when they were in the situation this week, which was buried because the way the game worked, he was not the dude on the field.
Let's talk a couple of tight ends here. I know we're getting pretty long into it, but
it's week 1, man. Nobody cares.
I know we're into it. I might go crack another beer here in a second.
I've been working for like 16 hours a day. Let's just freaking keep rolling. Drink another beer, Drake.
I might go get one in a second, to be honest. You guys on YouTube will get to see it.
So get up and go get it.
How about Irv Smith and TJ Hawkinson? Some people are asking us about Irv. It looks like, the couch, Kyle Rudolph, isn't really going away. 1 catch for 11 yards. Hawkinson did catch 5 balls and scored. So I think Galladay not being there hurt him in terms of coverage and focus from the defense. But just kind of touch on these 2 tight ends.
Yeah. Man, I love Hawkinson. I never expected him to be a huge target guy, but it's the upside, and it's what you just said. You get Galladay back. I don't think his role is going to change a lot from what we saw this weekend. I think every week what you're going to see from Hawkinson is anywhere from 4 to 6 targets. He'll have a week where all of a sudden we're like, whoa, man, 10 targets, and he wins you your league that week because he scores 3 touchdowns, because he has that kind of upside, and then the next week, he'll catch 4 balls for 50 and, be like, okay. But I just love the way they use him. I love, the matchups that he's going to see. He played really well. He scored a touchdown this last weekend. So I used Hawkinson in 80% of, my lineups this weekend for DFS. And I had him in every single lineup where I drafted him in there. Now, Irv Smith, man, here's what I'm going to say to you guys. If you're in a shallow league and you own Irv Smith, you don't have to be stubborn. Just go ahead. You can drop him and you just keep him on waiver wire, speed dial, as, like a guy like Bloom would say, right? He's just on your short list and you're just watching. And if Kyle Rudolph goes down for some reason, you immediately, whatever your roles are, I don't know, you make sure you get Irv Smith if that happens. But if you're in a jam right now and you're like, man, who do I drop? Again, shallow leagues, medium-sized leagues, yeah, you're probably still fine. You can drop him. Deeper leagues, you guys know your leagues. You're in a tight end premium league like I'm in a lot of, and in deeper league, I'm not dropping Irv Smith. But in a lot of formats, you can. He ran a route on 52% of dropbacks, still better than Kyle Rudolph, but not by much. Kyle Rudolph was at 48%. They both played 61% of the snaps. Irv Smith only saw 4% of targets. So Irv Smith's a guy that, I didn't start him anywhere. Hopefully you guys didn't either. You knew he was more of a guy. Like I didn't start Paris Campbell, but I will get to now, right? A lot of those guys you let sit. You see what happens, see what shakes out. Irv Smith, there's no way you can play him right now. But if he outright, there's 2 paths, right, Drake? He outright wins, the role. or number 2, Kyle Rudolph gets hurt. And the other thing I'm going to say is, man, their secondary is freaking terrible. It's awful. So
there's a couple teams you can see now that are funnels that way, where we're going to attack the Giants, we're going to attack the Vikings, teams that stink.
Yeah, the Vikings secondary is a real mess, and that's going to lead to this team needs to score more. What could happen is you could see less 12 and see more 11, and they just make the determination right that they need more firepower on the field. I mean, Thielen we love, but he can't do it all. So Thielen was 32% of the targets, never left. 96% of snaps. He was out there for every drop back. Justin Jefferson was next at 84%. They gave us the old Olabisi Johnson. No, Olabisi Johnson, you still suck. Just go back to the bench. 65% of routes. So Justin Jefferson was the guy on the field most. So I know we didn't talk about him earlier, but great guy to think about picking up, because as bad as this is going to be from a standpoint of this defense, I knew it was going to be a step back, but it looks like it may be a huge step back. Man, they're going to have to use these guys. So again,
the Vikings only threw the ball 5 times in the first half this week.
I know, and
Crazy.
they're going to get pushed out of that. It is insane. Like when you look at the data on it, like I was like looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is really, really stubborn. They trailed Drake on 73% of plays, 73%. They eventually, at the end, did end up 63% pass and 37% run. But to your point, they were holding it down as long as they could, and they were already losing. So again, I know what they want to do. They want to be efficient in their offense, and I love it. I love that scheme. But if you get down huge, you got to pick up the tempo or something. It doesn't mean you don't get away from play action or anything like that. That's the other thing, dude. They only ran play action 10% of the time. They're a 35% play action team last year. So that also hurt Irv Smith and just the game plan. So anyway, Irv Smith, to make a long story short, but it's already been a long story. If you're in a shallow league and you need to drop him, I get it. I totally understand. Deeper leagues, you guys have to make your own choice. I'm not dropping him in the formats that I'm in. But I may have to in another 2 or 3 weeks. There might be a team tonight where I run waivers and I do have to do it. But we'll see.
2 more guys. And I want to get your opinion on Chris Carson, because he scored a couple of touchdowns. I had a buddy in my league who has him, and he's like, oh man, really fired up to have Chris Carson as my flex. That's awesome. I think his RB2 was James Conner, so he's kind of struggling now, but 6 carries on a guy that only played 28 snaps. He did catch 6 balls and had the 2 scores, so that was encouraging, but 6 carries?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. Well, one, they're, finally letting Russ Wilson do his thing. So if you drafted Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf in the 4th and 5th rounds, if this holds, like another week we see Wilson do this, if we were to redraft right now, they would be 2nd and 3rd round picks. Because now you're taking 5 and 6 targets a week and looking to hit a big play to 8 and 9 targets a week from these 2 guys. So that's kind of not what you asked about. But if this continues with Russ Wilson throwing, and I don't know that it wouldn't, I mean, they led basically the whole game and they kept throwing. So everybody asked, the fantasy masses want it. Everybody said, let Russ cook. Looks like they're letting him. If you own Russell Wilson right now, you may have the QB1 in the entire league if they let him continue doing this, because the last time he got to pass this much, he was QB1. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes are going to have something to say about that, but Russ will be right there in the conversation. As far as Chris Carson goes, yeah, didn't even play half the snaps, ran a route on 46% of dropbacks, but he was targeted 18% of the time. And man, when you got those guys pushing all the defense off deep, and then you get the check down and you're a physical, rugged runner like Chris Carson, you're going to do some good things. And so that's what happened. I still think he's the lead back, but yes, Carlos Hyde, got in there and did some things. Carson was in the 2-minute drill 50% of the time, but not all of it. He was not used on 3rd and 4th and long. They didn't use him at all there. He had 0 snaps. Oddly, it was Travis Homer that got used there. There were only 5 plays they had like that the whole game, but still to get 0, that's kind of bad, for Chris Carson. He only got 1 of the carries inside the 5. So, he only had 33% of the snaps inside the 5. He got 0% of the carries inside the 5. So Chris Carson, I like him, but man, I think you're on fragile ground as far as him being able to keep those fantasy points up. And if you look at the 4-minute offense, that wasn't him either. So when you're trying to grind clock, Carlos Hyde was getting in the act. Carson got some of that, but Hyde was, got almost just as much. So
imagine if Penny comes back this year too.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Honestly, I think Hyde, it's going to be his role to be the number 2 as long as he's healthy, because, I think he fits what they want to do, and then Penny will be the 3. But yeah, they could all 3 be in. Look, dude, game 1, what we're not really talking about. Travis Homer played 21% of the snaps. I don't know how much of that is due to a blowout. Probably some of it. My guess is what you'll see normally is Carson around 55 to 60% of snaps. You'll see Hyde probably right around 30 to 35, and you'll see Homer at like 5%. He was 21%. Now some of those are special teams for him because he does play special teams. But I think Chris Carson, we're probably looking at Drake, 12 to 15 carries a week, and you're going to hope he might get 3 or 4 targets. That's kind of what I'm feeling here. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think I love the fact that they're throwing the ball to him, and that's going to save his value. And I've always been a Chris Carson fan, so I think he'll be fine. And forget the let Russ cook hashtag. It's going to be hashtag let Dwain sleep, because he's been going so hard here all day. So the last guy we're going to talk about is Joe Mixon. And he rushed 19 of the 20 Bengals carries, only got 69 yards, didn't end up scoring or anything. He did run more pass routes than Gio Bernard. But you and I were texting during the game, and at the end when they were trying to make their comeback and win the game, Gio Bernard was the back on the field. So, again, that's concerning that when they're looking to throw the ball, it's not Mixon.
Yeah, 2-minute offense, 7% of snaps to Mixon.
Yikes.
You really don't need to know anything else. 3rd and 4th down and over 7 yards, 17%. They're not doing it. I know they said they were gonna, and I know there were so many people that told us you're dumb. And look, you're not going to get all these calls right. And it's not like we want to root against Joe Mixon. I drafted him a couple times. Basically, my advice was, look, I don't feel super charged about any one of these guys owning the passing down roles. It is what it is. So Jacobs, jury's out. Looked like he got a little more work, even though, he didn't get some of the 2-minute stuff or the 3rd and long stuff last week. But we'll see that once he gets in a different game script. Mixon, we've already seen in this game script. So we know.
Yeah.
He ain't getting it. It ain't happening. Now, they could eventually say, Gio Bernard, get out of the way. But people forget, they signed Gio last year to like a 3-year deal or something. I can't remember. And it was for too much money. And they want to use him. But Gio was out there for 73% of the snaps in the 2-minute drill. Gio got 50%, of the work on 3rd and 4th. So look, man, I don't know what to say, but it ain't happening for Joe Mixon. It's the same thing we saw last year. So It could change, but 1 target, 3%. I don't know what to say on behind a bad offensive line and an offense that people overrated. We talked about that too. It's still a rookie quarterback. You didn't have minicamp. You didn't have installs. I love Joe Burrow. Maybe by week 6, it's great, but he also plays behind one of the worst lines in the league. Yes, they got their 1st-round pick from last year back. He's playing this year, but he can't fix the whole line by himself. The whole thing sucks. So, look, dude, it's like some of this stuff is funny. You argue about this stuff on Twitter. People are like, and it's like, it's not. I like Joe Mixon. I think he's a great player, and I'm all for free Joe Mixon. Trade. No one will even trade you for Gio Bernard. That's what's funny. But you sign into this contract. It's like, whatever you got to do to get rid of Gio Bernard and just let Mixon do his thing. I'm all for it. The coach just isn't.
Well, we really appreciate everybody hanging out with us tonight. All the great guys in the chat room. Thank you so much. If you're watching on YouTube or you want to watch us on YouTube, just go hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on iTunes or whatever, leave a 5-star review. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We're on Twitter at FF Hustle, also on Instagram at FF Hustle if you want to come see us there. He is at Dwain McFarland. I'm Drake Fantasy. Anything else you want to lay out there, Dwain, before we get out of here?
A couple of questions in here. Like everybody's asking about Miles Sanders, like it's the Eagles. So we're like a couple minutes away from like making this a 2-hour show. Yes, I saw a question at the top. Would you trade? Hang on, I have to scroll back up. Would you trade Chubb or Mixon for Miles Sanders? Yes, in a full PPR, I would. If I could get him on the download. Now, Drake, you can take me off of this if you can tell me more about the injury, but everything I've read was, and who knows, they actually felt like he could go last week, but they just wanted to be precautious with it, and they may have been a little bit cocky and thought that, it's the Redskins. Or sorry, the football team. It's old habits die hard, but I'm sorry I said that, but the football team. So if you tell me that you think that, that's probably accurate, and you think he's going to play this next week, I mean, how many weeks? He's had like 4 weeks to heal, 5 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Here's what I can tell you. Miles Sanders is going to be involved in the passing game. He
has to be. Their running game is non-existent behind that offensive line.
And if the running game gets going again, he's going to be involved in both. And so again, catching passes in a PPR league is like what it's all about. And so if you can get him for Mixon or Chubb, great. Now look, when Kareem Hunt goes down, don't at me later when Nick Chubb is the number 1 running back. Because I'm telling you, if Kareem Hunt goes down or does something dumb, Nick Chubb has the chance to be the number 1 running back. Like very easily could happen. So you are taking that risk. You have to take that on yourself and say, look, I'm just going to bypass it. If this happens, I'm going to feel sick to my stomach about getting rid of Chubb. But if you're playing percentages and we don't know if Chubb's going to be hurt or not, most likely he's not. I'm taking, Miles Sanders the same way I would have drafted Miles Sanders over those two guys because I like what he's going to do in the passing game. Any others in here you want to answer?
This week, Herndon or Goddard? Maybe it's just a roster question. Who'd you rather have?
I would go Goddard. Mm-hmm. They're both running the same amount, of routes, and I have to go with the guy that looked better in the first week. Both guys are going to have to block plenty because the offensive lines are a mess. So I like Goddard's big play upside better with his quarterback.
Would you trade Michael Thomas for Kenny Golladay at this point? Well, they're both hurt, so.
Man, I don't think I have enough information to answer that. The last I read before we hopped on the show is they think Michael Thomas is probably a multiple week injury. Yeah. I don't know where Kenny Golladay is though. And I don't know are they thinking Kenny Golladay is going to play this week? Here's the deal. Galladay's not going to get 150 targets. Like what Golladay is going to give you is 100 to 120 targets over the season, but he's going to give you big yards and he has huge touchdown upside. Now he also has real dud upside, or downside, because when he doesn't score his touchdowns, because they spread it out and they go vertical all down the field. So it's going to be like that for everybody. You're going to have weeks where Hawkinson hits and, Jones catches 1 touchdown, Galladay's none. Then you have the week where Golladay catches 3 touchdowns and everybody on Twitter says, this is why I drafted him in the first round of my fantasy draft because I'm a badass and Galladay's really tall and you look at his muscles, but then the next week, you're going to have the down again. So it's just tough. If I really thought Golladay was going to play this week and I think Michael Thomas's injury keeps him out another 4 to 6 weeks, then I would, just because even if Thomas comes back and he's amazing, you get Golladay for the 4 to 6 weeks now, so I would do it.
Here's a trade question, then we'll hit the bricks. Evans, I assume it's Mike Evans and Austin Eckler for Stephon Diggs and Aaron Jones.
No.
Sticking with Evans and Eckler.
Yep, I would stick with it. So here's the deal just with Jones. So since everybody hung out so long, the exact nightmare scenario from a usage, potential, it happened, week 1. So, I mean, if you look at Aaron Jones in week 1, it's back to what we saw last year when Jamal Williams was healthy. And we talked about it. We loved Aaron Jones. He won us several leagues last year, and he's a guy that we told people to draft, and we were super excited, and he did pay off for us. but he only played 53% of the snaps. He only ran a route on 43% of dropbacks. Now, he was heavily engaged in the passing game when he was out there. Rodgers does like him. He had 15% of the targets. He had 0% of the snaps in the 2-minute offense. He only played 25% of the snaps on 3rd and 4th down and long. Inside the 5, though, he got 71% of the snaps and 67% of the carries. So that's where he makes his money. He did also have 2 targets in the end zone, which is nuts for like a running back. Like some running backs have that for their season. So with Jones, if this is like a trend where they're really going to use him that much more in the passing game, and he got decent passing game usage last year, but we also saw it do this thing up and down, because this week, Jamal Williams had 10%. Jamal Williams got all the 2-minute work. Jamal Williams is the guy that got all the 3rd and 4th down and long work. So I think it depends on the game script. So Jones is still a bit up and down. I think he gives you the touchdown upside, obviously, the big play upside. But man, if you're giving up Eckler, and Mike, I like Mike Evans over Stephon Diggs, right? I still do. And I mean, I think Eckler and Jones are still a coin flip to me. So I would lean towards keeping Mike Evans.
What do you think about this Allen Robinson story? People saying, he's looking for a trade. He wants to get out. And this is the ultimate, millennial move now is I took down all the Bear stuff from my Instagram. I'm unfollowing, Tariq Cohen. Like, stop being a bitch. Like, nobody cares if you do that. It's so lame.
Someone is going to add him and like put this clip in there.
Good. I hope you get traded to Philadelphia. We could use your ass.
And Drake would no longer call you a bitch.
We got enough bitches playing wide receiver for that team in Philly.
Drake, hey, women play football now. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. So what I would say is if you're in a shallow league or, maybe mid-sized league and a guy like Anthony Miller's on the wire, I mean, I don't mind, grabbing him. They rotated the second receiver. Allen Robinson dominated everything this past week. But when Miller's on the field, Trubisky looks for him. He was the second most targeted guy with Cohen. So if there's a guy that's going to benefit the most, it's Anthony Miller. The other guys are guys, right? Darnell Mooney, he's a speed guy, can move around. He's, it's kind of funny. Nagy is so infatuated with like having these trinkets. I'm just like, dude, just put together a real freaking football team. Like, for God's sake, you trained under Andy Reid. You see him doing this bullshit? No.
Cordell Patterson out there.
Just what are you doing? Around. Cordell Patterson, Darnell Mooney. Last year it was Taylor Gabriel. You got the sign Ted Ginn. I don't like Matt Nagy. I think he tries to be too cute.
Go sign good football players. How about that? Or the one that is good on your team, pay him.
And it's not like he didn't learn that. Like he was under Andy Reid. Like he knows what good football players look like.
You know what Andy Reid always did? Andy Reid always went and developed a quarterback. Like you just paid Nick Foles a bunch of dough to sit behind this clown. Like Trubisky's terrible. I don't care if you won the game or not. Trubisky's awful. You're not going anywhere with him. I mean, you're hoping for 6 wins.
Andy Reid, he'd have a trinket player here or there, but you can honestly call Mecole Hardman's a trinket player. That's really what he is right now. We don't know what he'll eventually be. He's very early in his, player career arc because he played DB basically up until 1 year before, he came to the NFL. But, I can think back to, Andy Reid having some players, like DeAnthony Thomas, but he never tried to get him overly involved. Like when he had Jamal Charles, it's like, we'll throw you a couple of snaps, but it's like, I don't get it. Like Nagy lets all these guys have too many looks. And it's just, I feel like it's too schemey, right? It's kind of like, we're going to put you out here on a bubble screen. Then we're going to run this special play just for you. And then when the play doesn't go right, well, shit, we're screwed. It's like, I feel like he thinks everything's X's and O's and he can move all these little pieces around and he's like this mastermind. And I'm like, man, people throw those guys off their routes. They just chunk them around. Things don't go as planned and then you're screwed. It's like what you just said. Just go get football players. And guess what?
When that works,
football player.
That works when you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who can make, second reaction throws.
But even then, they
and,
don't do that. That's not what Tyreek Hill is. Tyreek Hill's a real player. Sammy Watkins, for being, never living up to the billing, he's not just a trinket. He's a player. Travis Kelce is a player. Edwards-Helaire is a good player. Kareem Hunt was a good player. These aren't like guys that play 20 and 30% of the snaps. These guys play every down. Nicole Hardman is the only trinket that they have on their offense.
All right, we hit 2 hours. If you're watching on YouTube and we can see you live on there, there's a lot of you that are. Hit that subscribe button. Everybody else, we really appreciate it. We're going to get out of here, and good luck in week 2. See you next Tuesday. See what I did there? All right. Never get out hustled, folks. Enjoy the waivers, and we'll be back at you next time. Take it easy.